Next, please welcome Kristin Leong, who will be reading nonfiction.
Thank you first to our fearless leaders, Mark, Megan, Craig, Kathy. Thank you for every bit of magic you have built here. It has changed my life. It has changed so many of our lives. And to my endlessly generous mentor teachers, Hugh Ryan, Eula Bist, Garrett Connolly, and Sabrina Oramark, it has been an extraordinary experience to work my way through this work under your care. Thank you forever and ever and ever. And to this cohort, you are all the readers and writers and weirdos that I have been looking for my whole life. I love you all. And to Siobhan, thank you for your nudge yesterday. I needed that. Finding St. Jude. Jude the Apostle is the patron saint of last resorts and lost causes. On pendants and prayer cards, he is usually depicted with a club or an axe, a nod to the grisly death that martyred him. Sometimes, though, he is pictured with a book. My son, now 17, recently told me that if I were a My Little Pony, my cutie mark, the signature stamps on the pony's hindquarters, would be a book. This is one sign of many that St. Jude has always been the saint for me. According to the organizers behind the Apostle of the Impossible tour that visited 100 cities across the U.S. in 2023, nearly 2 million super fans of St. Jude turned out to bring their gratitude and most desperate petitions to the literal arm of the Holy Messenger. The star of this tour was a bone that was apparently Jude's. The bone, perhaps the radius or the ulna, was encased in a wood sculpture shaped like a man's forearm with its thumb, pointer, and middle fingers outstretched. The bulbous vase is covered in veiny carvings. The sculpture represents a gesture of blessing, says Treasures of the Church, the Houston, Texas-based nonprofit that lent the arm bone and its creative casing to the tour. I didn't know about this tour in the fall of 2023 as I prepared to face King County Superior Court one last time to argue for the protection of my son, just as I didn't know about St. Jude when I became pregnant with him in 2007. I was bartending and go-go dancing in nightclubs with lost but mostly soft-hearted alcoholics and girls with lucite souls when I realized my period was late and I was going to become a single mom. I kept the baby because I have always wanted a baby, and I knew if I didn't, I would be dead soon. I thought single parenting would be hard, but I had done hard things before. If I had known how hopeless everything would become before it got better, maybe I would have made different choices. Maybe not. I was 26. I thought I could imagine the worst of last resorts and lost causes. I was wrong. By the time I was endeavoring to soothe myself to sleep by imagining me and my baby curled in the palm of St. Jude, I had traded nightclubs for classrooms, coworkers and friends for colleagues. While I bussed between classes and bartending shifts over the 18 months it took me to get a master's in education, I left my baby with other club kids, classmates, or the family members who raised me and my 2 sisters in ways that I had no intention of reproducing. What else was I supposed to do? Teaching turned out to be the hardest job I'd ever love. With the same ferocity that I was simultaneously bringing to court hearings, I organized community showcases with my students, founded a school speaker series to bring my diverse friends to share their diverse perspectives, and led a public battle with the district to add even one book to the required 6th grade language arts curriculum that included a character of color. I taught, in other words, like my life and my child's life depended on it. But still, my 7 years as a single mom middle school teacher were a deeply lonely time for me, although I was almost never alone. I told myself it was okay. I'll just raise my child and take care of my students. It is enough. It is more love than I ever expected to have in my life, more than I thought I deserved. During those years, I found comfort in two main things: listening to public radio and imagining St. Jude somewhere out there, keeping an eye on me and my boy. I taught my son about St. Jude and how to pray because I wanted him to be fluent in gratitude and asking for help. Since the summer he was 15, the two of us have been steady with our Sundays. That was the summer of the emergency pickup from his last visitation. As I write this, it has been 916 days since that July afternoon my son maneuvered around the blacked-out body of his biological father and then sprinted over to me and my wife, waiting in our running car on the street outside. None of us knew then that that would be the last time, but I had said a silent prayer. Shortly after that pickup, my son announced that he wanted to start going to church again. Over the months of domestic violence protection order filings and hearings, and a Bennington Writing Seminars application deadline that followed, every Sunday my wife would go for a long run, and my son and I would go to services. All through that season of family court reruns, my very tall son and I rose and sat and greeted our neighbors and sang the songs and amened along with the sermons. And for a couple hours a week, our phones were away and we were in the same nest together again. Sometimes we got donuts afterwards, and he'd offer me a crumb of a crush he has or the latest scandal with his friends. I would try to play it cool, but I know he knew I was so hungry for all of it. Now, more than 2 years since that devastating but devout summer of 2023, the stakes of our battles have lowered significantly. When I remember to be grateful, I think how lucky my wife and I are these days to be annoyed with the pedestrian conflicts of life with a teenager. Nagging him to turn in school forms that are already late, losing negotiations with him over wearing actual pants instead of pajamas in public, reminding him in an endless loop that if he leaves his clothes in the washer wet, he will just have to wash them again. What a gift, these everyday catastrophes, compared to the actual ones we faced before. Since that last visitation, my son has had his first girlfriend, first 2 jobs, and was caught once with a watermelon-flavored vape pen. He has learned to drive, produce a radio show, and make his own haircut appointments. He has recovered from his first heartbreak and broken at least one heart. He has turned 16, then 17. He has grown a sparse but enthusiastic mustache. There has been so much life and so much relief and freedom, and yet, lately, I have the near constant sense that I am about to explode into sobbing or vomit. I wonder if I might find some relief if my body would do either one or both of those things, but I can't. Instead, after making tea one morning recently, my left nostril poured out blood for 15 minutes, and then later started in again while I was at Trader Joe's shopping for wine. I didn't notice the blood's return until I got back in the car after chatting with a checkout teenager who, in retrospect, did seem a little unnerved. And then there's also this. More than once recently, when walking the dogs, my eyes watered so much my whole face dripped. It's so cold this year, I thought to myself the first time it happened. But there had been no wind. Even the Februarys I spent on the East Coast never made my eyes water. In short, things are pressing on and coming out of my body in ways I do not intend or enjoy. And meanwhile, my son is turning out like me in so many ways I tried so hard to plan against, his careful face turning sullen and inward, seemingly out of nowhere, his sadness punched through the soft, dry wall of his bedroom one impossible night, and my wife. She is training for a marathon with such intensity that I suspect she has taken on this long-distance midlife hobby in lieu of running away from home. I go over the checklist again. I read to him every night until far after he was too old for bedtime stories. I made him wear an undershirt. I blended spinach into spaghetti sauce. I didn't rush him through learning how to tie his shoes. I noticed out loud when he was kind or curious. I waited to cry until the car pulled away when I had to drop him off for those vile visitations. I married the woman who loved us both like we had always been hers forever and ever and ever, and yet everything presses, his teenagehood, my wife's marathoning, all the possibilities of his post-high school life beckoning him away from me. My own cell-deep exhaustion and grief, despite so much love in my life and having everything I never knew even to want. All three of us in this family I built so close now to release. When the pressing gets especially heavy, I think about those nearly 2 million people who found their way to the St. Jude arm bone when I was fighting what I didn't realize would be our last family court war. How many of them were going to place their hopeless causes at the base of that veiny relic? How many were going to give thanks for desperate prayers answered? What would I have brought with me? My last resorts or my gratitude? Back then, I was drowning in both. I can't figure out why I feel like I'm still drowning. Now, I check the Apostle of the Impossible website because I think maybe some worship and wonder might relieve some of the pressing, that if I could just go to a place to be with my thankfulness so profound that it bleeds through every part of my body and holds me up like a bone, that maybe my eyes might stop watering. The tour of the major relics of St. Jude is complete, the website tells me unapologetically in huge red type, and then just as huge, just as red, the plea I once considered getting tattooed on my body when my boy was a baby. St. Jude, pray for us. Maybe I think I do not need a pilgrimage right now. Everything in me has been pointed towards my child's upcoming birthday for so long. Now that it's here, our freedom, our safety, our life without the violence of commissioners or courtrooms. I wonder if St. Jude, with his bone and his book, his club and his axe, will keep calling to me. It has always struck me as not just morbid, but deeply unfair that saints are so often defined forever by the one moment they could not survive. Jude's book, his life's work, it seems, should have been enough. This book, my My Little Pony cutie mark, I hope is enough. For nearly every page of this journey, I felt like I could not survive the writing of this manuscript. It couldn't be worse just to tell the story my wife, therapist, and mentors kept assuring me than it was to live it the first time. But now that I'm here at this end beginning, my son almost 18, this MFA almost finished, I am not so sure. It's been awful, if I'm being honest, to pour this story into pages I have needed to believe would be the redemption I have been chasing for so long. Instead of relief or repossession, the telling of this story has turned out to be mostly me sobbing and raging fresh again as I looked back in order to collage together what happened so that a reader might be able to understand, so that I might be able to understand. Here, I wanted to be able to say with this impossible project, here is who we are and how we've been marked. Here are our symbols and survivals. Here are our bones. What I didn't plan for when I started this work was that my son would cross over from childhood to young adulthood in the time it took me to write the first draft. Your cutie mark would be a book, he said, just weeks before my thesis deadline, and the chill of being seen by the child I have been watching so closely for so long struck me like providence. I don't know anymore if this is my story to tell. Thank you.
Hi, Kristin. That was so great. Thank you. I wanted to ask about your relationship with Christianity and your relationship. Yeah, just diving right in. And the relationship between your faith, if you are religious, and your practice as a writer, or if you're not like Christian, the relationship between your interest in Christianity and your practice as a writer.
I'll say this. When my son announced that he wanted to go back to church, it was because I had taken him to church when he was little, and the only caveat I told him was that the church he chooses for us cannot believe that our family, our gay family, is going to hell. So he picked a very inclusive church, and it is a very inclusive service. In fact, the church was disowned from their larger organization once they decided LGBTQ people should generally be able to go about our lives unbothered. So that's what I'll say about my faith. Yeah, thank you. Hi, Ian.
Hey, Kristin. That was such a beautiful essay. There was like a lot of themes going through that you all, like you were great at weaving those all together, like mother raising her child, faith, religion, the legal part of it, all of that. Just wondering, what was like the impetus for the essay itself? Like, how did you start writing it, and then how did all the pieces come together?
Messily. One of the things I admire so much about all of my mentor teachers is that they also have so many brilliant ideas that they are able to so gracefully bring together and come back to in ways that are so surprising. So I feel very, very fortunate to be mentored by people who are doing work that I really, really admire and that I hope to be able to do. So it was helpful to be working with people who understood what it felt like to have a million different things I wanted to say at once. That being said, revision is my best friend because I do end up sort of all over the place. And then my hope is just that it comes back around in a way that is coherent to somebody out there. So I'm glad to hear that perhaps that did for you, Ian.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Hi, Kristin. You have joined the ranks of badass Bennington women. That was amazing. And I just was really in awe of the freshness and heat in the writing, and then hearing that some of the pieces came in as recent as, the child's upcoming birthday and the itty bitty, St. Jude's mark. How do you know when you're done and when you have it,
I can say this, preparing this reading, I was telling you before the reading, I'm like, so this is a very different version of this essay than I turned in for my thesis, hope that's okay. I can say that what helps me a lot is preparing to perform aloud, helps me edit a lot, because on the page, I feel a little too much freedom to meander and repeat myself, but I'm very conscious in a way I'm not when I'm writing for the page, when I'm writing for the stage, of keeping things succinct. So it's been very helpful for me to think about writing that maybe someday read aloud. That's been helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.